Hey guys, this is Standing for Truth. Do you ever wonder why proponents of evolutionism seem to lose every single debate that they have? Well, it's partly because they have a straw man understanding of the biblical based model. Their arguments are weak. They do not come prepared. 99.9% of evolutionary proponents and believers in this science fiction based religion will not come out to actually debate because it's an indefensible position. In this video, we are going to expose and debunk two theistic evolutionists who had a few things to say after my last Lion's Den 2-on-1 debate with Esteban and Joseph. First off, in this clip that you're about to see, one of the theistic evolutionists starts right off with a straw man, bringing up Lenski's experiment. For one, I challenge both these men to a discussion or a debate on the science of evolutionism. I want to talk testable predictions. I want us to talk the biblical creation model and the model of universal common ancestry. Now, it was me who brought up the Lenski experiment in this debate, and we're going to see that clearly from the clips that I include here. Now, at the end of the day, it has been documented that this Lenski experiment, the bacteria, they have not experienced forward evolution, but as a matter of fact, the net effect observed in this experiment, it has been reductive. In other words, evolution is going backward. Yes, there has been some adaptation seen in this artificial environment, but this has primarily been done and accomplished through loss of function mutations. At the end of the day, this type of degenerative adaptive gain, this type of adaptive fine-tuning, at best can be called microevolution. And it's all accomplished through a net loss of information. Broken genes, disrupted gene regulation, loss of promoter. Genes are being lost short-term, but it's long-term degeneration, and the functional bacterial genome has shrunk and it contains less total information. These bacterial strains that have resulted, they're still the same species, but they have been seriously damaged, and at the end of the day, these disabled strains would abruptly go extinct in any natural environment. And the whole point of Lenski's experiment in his bacteria, the whole reason I brought it up many times in this debate was because if any experiment, this experiment was started by Dr. Richard Lenski at Michigan State University, and this experiment continues to this day. And as I was saying, if any experiment could have validated large-scale fish-to-fisherman type evolution, the fact that these that hold to evolutionism literally believe that whales, pine trees, bananas, and T-Rex are related through common ancestry, it would have been this one. And yet this famous experiment powerfully demonstrates that the mutation selection process has extremely limited and serious limitations. With the huge populations and the vast, massive number of generations, all that was actually accomplished and observed was a trivial amount of adaptive microevolution. It's adaptive degeneration. It's reductive evolution. Things are not being taken forward. These evolutionists can't understand it, which is exactly why they fail to defend their religion of evolutionism in any worthy way. And which is why most evolutionary proponents avoid any type of actual confrontation or debate on their religion. What have we observed? Bacteria produce bacteria. More degenerate, handicapped bacteria for that matter. This in no way demonstrates that bacteria, whales, and pine trees are related. This is why I brought it up, and I got no answer, as will be seen here. Also, we talked about radiometric dating, and at the end of the day, no answer was given for that. I talked about how age isn't actually measured, and that it's certain processes, certain amounts of materials that are measured, and then the age is inferred. And these theistic evolutionists, including Joseph, they think they address the evidence. They think it's all about assumptions. The only argument is assumptions. But as you'll see here, no rebuttal was given to the brief portion of the debate where we discussed radiometric dating. For example, once again, as you'll see here, I talked about how it's a fact that radiometric ages for rocks of known ages actually turn out to be so seriously inaccurate, which is a strong suggestion that one or more of these assumptions is incorrect. Therefore, yes, there are assumptions, and there's empirical data that actually show that one or more of these assumptions is absolutely incorrect. We talked a little bit about carbon, and evolutionists, they assume it's always been the same radiocarbon influx. But here's the problem. The problem is that the carbon-14 is produced in the atmosphere as a result of cosmic ray bombardment of the atmosphere. And if you have a stronger magnetic field in the past, which the evidence shows, and the field we know protects from cosmic radiation, then radiocarbon production would have been less in the past. This is why our basic starting points and assumptions are important. Diamonds, for example, this is another thing I brought up and had no rebuttal to. Diamonds made up of carbon and have radiocarbon in them. Diamonds are formed deep inside the earth. They can't be contaminated internally or externally due to the hardness of the substance. The carbon-14 has to be intrinsic to the diamonds. It could not be from the atmosphere. Let's get into the biblical base model. If God instantly created trees, for example, and we analyze this, the leaves would have chlorophyll, as leaves do today, but it didn't come by normal processes. It comes down to starting points. So when God made the first rocks, they had atoms in them. If we come along later and say that lead must have come from decay of uranium, for example, therefore we will use that to date the rock, you'd be absolutely in error. As we know, there would be lead there to begin with. Why shouldn't there be? Guys, watch this clip. See why evolutionists lose every single debate that they participate in. See the straw man. See how little they actually understand about the biblical base model and how little they actually pay attention to the debate at hand. Enjoy, guys.
And I found out a lot of the stuff that Ray actually gets it from is from people who are outside of that field. And it's, I feel like it's kind of I really do feel like it's a straw man. So when he said that, it's not very accurate and it's just assumptions and everything like that, I was wondering, where is he getting that from? And can he actually cite it? But it is what it is. I cringed.
Thing is, I believe in science. Of course, science means to know. How do we know? Testing, observations, retesting, demonstrating, and it is empirical to science to say bacteria produces bacteria. Let's see Lenski's bacterial experiment, for example. It's the largest scaled evolutionary experiment to date. They've witnessed and observed thousands and thousands, I think more than 60,000 generations of bacteria. And what have we learned? We've learned that bacteria produce more bacteria. So how long is it going to take? And if we look at the law of monophyly, we're never going to outgrow our ancestry. And yet after so many generations, we see bacteria, for one, they're more degenerative bacteria, but they're still bacteria. And yet you want to say that bacteria, dogs, pine trees, and whales are all related. It seems like the evolutionist is doing a lot of imagining. So that's why I say it's a belief system, because it takes a strong belief, and I put a capital B on the word belief, to believe that these things are related. I mean, how do you explain Lenski's experiment? How long is it going to take for us to see something new, novel, and meaningful? Go ahead.
A strong belief can come from a strong body of evidence. It doesn't mean that it has anything to do with faith.
But it seems like these incremental changes you're talking about over successive generations, it seems like evolutionists are imagining that all these small scale variations are eventually going to add up to make something we don't actually observe. And mutations, it seems like there's a lot of imagining going on there too, because you're imagining that mutations make something new and better. Yet we know mutations are the destroyer and not the creator. So how do you explain Lenski's experiment, for example? Let's look at a real-time experiment in the lab trying to demonstrate large-scale evolution, and all we've seen is bacteria producing bacteria.
That would mean that we would probably die out long ago.
Because you're imagining that mutations make something new and better, yet we know mutations are the destroyer and not the creator. So how do you explain Lenski's experiment, for example? Let's look at a real-time experiment in the lab trying to demonstrate large-scale evolution, and all we've seen is bacteria producing bacteria. Oh, are you looking for a metric?
Yes, but first of all, let me tell you this, from what you're talking about with genetic entropy, that would mean that we would probably die out long ago unless you provide me a really specific number that I can plug in somewhere to say that that's not what actually happens.
Well, that's why we see degeneration on a large scale. For example, we see entropic degeneration on all levels. We see increased rates in cancer, autism, immunological diseases, autoimmune diseases. I mean, the mutation rate is generally agreed upon, and I'll ask if you agree with this as well, as to 100 new mutations per person per generation. Let me explain it really simple for the audience, because I don't know if a lot of this, of what you're saying, you're a big math guy, physics guy. I don't want it to confuse them. So I want to see what you think if I use this kind of an analogy. So if we know that we inherit 100 new mutations per person per generation, so what we're doing is I'll let you have plenty of time to respond. I just want the audience to understand. I think it's important for the argument. But we obviously transmit a small amount of mutations to our children. So for example, you're a math guy, right? First generation, that's 100 additional mutations. How many of those are deleterious? Well, we can get into that after. Now, second generation, 200 additional mutations. Third generation, 300 additional mutations. So let's take a room full of people, guys, Esteban, Joseph. Now kill off the most mutant people, okay? Natural selection, for example. Now we have a room half full of people who still have approximately 100 more mutations than their parents. So if everybody is multiply mutant, because we know that natural selection acts on the phenotype, not the genotype. So let's say if everybody is multiply mutant, and if every generation is more mutant than the one before it, all this selection that we're talking about can do, guys, is slow down the degeneration problem by killing off the absolute worst of the lot, because no creationist disagrees with natural selection, but it doesn't stop mutations from accumulating in the population over time. So that's why we are destined for extinction. And the fact that we're not extinct yet proves that the genome is young, because you were saying, oh, we should have gone extinct based on these mutations. Well, that's the point. We haven't gone extinct because the genome is young. So how do you feel about, I hope the audience kind of gets a good picture on what we mean by genetic entropy. Model, mutations at the end of the day, they're not, construction, they're destruction. But if we actually look at, say, a real-time example, say, let's use Lenski's long-term bacterial experiment, if you're familiar with that. So we know that a very trivial adaptation happened, because what it was optimal growth on a given medium, right? But Lenski's bacteria, what they actually did was they shrank in genome size. So in other words, the functional genome, it actually decreased. So it became evident with this experiment, and they're still observing it, that the more rapid growth in these bacteria, it was actually very much and significantly accomplished through genetic degeneration. So it's actually a fact too that many useful genes, say not essential in that artificial environment of Lenski's experiment, they're actually lost, which means at the end of the day, not only are they lazy and they're handicapped in that environment, when transferred to a natural environment, those highly degenerated bacteria, they would certainly be dead on arrival. So right there is, real-time evidence of that genetic degeneration, which once again, I'm just saying is consistent with the biblical model. And I don't understand how natural selection is going to be able to stop this degradation problem. Like, do you have a solution to it? And how do you feel about the Lenski example? Are you familiar with Lenski's experiment? Go ahead.
Yeah, I've heard about it. It's been a while since I've even looked into it. But from what I understand, as far as the Lenski experiment goes, The bacteria broke off into another species, and there were like a couple generations of evolution. And so you can see over a large period of time, like 30 years of evolution. Linsky, he for younger creationists, I would say he demonstrated macroevolution.
Worn out places, worn out faces, bright and early for their daily races, going.
So that's pretty much how I understand it.
But at the end of the day, because this aerobic citrate digestion by bacteria, that was the big one that was seen. If it involves, say, the loss of control of the normal anaerobic citrate digestion, and it's a, sure, it's an adaptation, but it's a very much, degenerative adaptive change, that's not going to, take your fish to fishermen. Because if we're seeing, losses of information, we're seeing genetic degeneration, that's no help to large scale evolution. Because obviously we agreed that, the word evolution means a change in allele frequency in populations over generations. But if these changes are degenerative, that's more consistent with a young earth creation model, because obviously there's a shelf life on these genomes if we're accumulating these mutations, right? I mean, do you understand that a neutral mutation is is not selected for or against? I'll start here with my closing. See, the thing is, the dating process, which I do understand, is that it requires measuring how much daughter element, like Joseph here said, that is actually in a rock sample, and then knowing the decay rate. So, for example, uranium into lead, or into potassium. Now, like I said, it is based on assumptions. For example, the initial conditions of the rock sample are accurately known. There's one assumption. The amount of parent or daughter elements in a sample has not actually been altered by processes, say, other than radioactive decay. Because at the end of the day, yes, secularists, they measure the amounts of the radioactive parent and the daughter isotopes in the present. That's the problem here. We have basic assumptions that are different on the past. So that way you're making a whole host of unprovable naturalistic assumptions and then extrapolate backwards in time to make what is essentially a guess about an age. So what Joseph here and Esteban are assuming is uniformitarianism, right? The present is the key to the past. Why do we see carbon in diamonds? Why do we see carbon in dinosaurs? Why do we see soft, stretchy tissue still present? I mean, everything about these dating methods are just wrong, and it's very easy to demonstrate.
First of all, I'm going to address that you said daughter elements are affected by other processes. No, that could be true, but scientists have figured out ways to determine whether something has been affected by things like heat or chemical processes. They take these things into account all the time, or else they would be out of the job or laughed at by the rest of the scientific community. As for your question about why diamonds exist with carbon, that's really... It's not carbon-14. Why would you assume that there would be no carbon? That's just that's just outlandish. But Jesus Christ. Anyways, I'll yield the rest of my time. You guys think about standing for truth, saying all radiometric dating is based only on assumptions and shit.
When he's okay, so when he said that, I was wondering, where is he making that claim from? Because when you actually look at, like, y'all brought up Linsky and everything, right? And when you brought up that, I was wondering, where is he getting this from? Because if he's getting this from, like, Kent Hovind or Ray Comfort or something like that, Ray Comfort is, right? Mr. Banana Man, yeah.
I'm saying in regards to, radiometric dating, age isn't actually measured. And you might agree with this, give us your take on this, Joseph. Rather certain processes and amounts of materials are actually measured. And then the age itself is inferred. And what I find amazing is the fact that radiometric ages for rocks of known ages actually turn out to be so amazingly inaccurate. That to me is a strong suggestion that one or more for one, the assumptions that are built in on radiometric dating must be incorrect.
Say the
So
other
Joseph, how do you feel debating standing for truth? That's
You want my honest opinion?
Yes.
a waste of time, right?
Getting this from like Kent Hovind or Ray Comfort or something like that.
There is no such thing as genetic entropy.
As you can see here from this short video, these guys lack significant substance. They clearly don't understand evolution. They clearly don't understand the science. At the end of the day, Sentinel Apologetics makes the statement debating standing for truth is a waste of time simply because he knows he can't defend the science of evolutionism. He knows that he can't debunk the science that is coming from young earth creationists. We are the ones making testable and falsifiable predictions. In genetics, we're making predictions on mitochondrial DNA haplogroups, for example, mitochondrial DNA rates. We have models, pre-existing heterozygosity model, for example. We can actually make predictions on flood geology. We look to genetic entropy, genetic degeneration. You have to be a science denier to reject and deny the truth that mutations are accumulating. Mutations are not the creator, they are the destroyer. Mutations are not construction, they're destruction. And at the end of the day, these low impact mutations are accumulating and degenerating our information systems. There is no rescue mechanism, synergistic epistasis, mutation count mechanism. They're artificial constructs. Sure, there is some synergistic epistasis, but none of these mechanisms can stop the eventual genome degradation. We are degenerating in many, many ways, and there's evidence of genetic entropy everywhere. Bacteria, viruses, humans, entropic degeneration on all levels. At the end of the day, these evolutionists, including these theistic evolutionists, the reason why they won't debate is because they know they have no serious rebuttal. They have no challenge to the truth, and this is a shame.
It's totally made up. Pure fiction. It's fiction. It's fiction. We made it up. We made this one up. It's a made-up tale. It's a total fabrication. It never happened. It never happened. This one was invented.